The silver ships came down from the sky on a Tuesday morning in the year 2247. They moved slowly, like leaves falling through water, and the whole world stopped to watch. Every television channel showed the same image. Every radio station went silent. People stood in the streets of New York and Tokyo and Cairo, looking up at the sky with fear and wonder. Admiral Samuel Hayes stood on the roof of the United Earth Command building in Geneva. He was 53 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many wars. Beside him stood his young aide, Lieutenant Diane Murphy, who was holding a tablet computer with shaking hands. "Sir, we have confirmation," Diane said. "They are not attacking. They want to talk." Samuel watched the largest ship descend toward the landing zone that had been hastily cleared in a nearby field. The ship was beautiful in a way that human machines never were. It looked like it had been grown rather than built. "Get me a direct line to every world leader," Samuel said. "Whatever happens today changes everything." The alien called himself Keleth Vorn. He was tall, nearly 7 feet, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly from within. His eyes were gold without pupils, and when he spoke, his voice was soft and musical. He looked at humans the way a parent might look at a curious child. "We have watched your species for a very long time," Keleth Vorn said through a translation device that turned his words into perfect English. "We saw you discover fire. We saw you build your first cities. We watched your wars and your art, your cruelty and your kindness." Samuel stood before the alien with his hands clasped behind his back. Around them, soldiers kept their weapons ready, though everyone knew that if these beings wanted to destroy humanity, there was nothing anyone could do to stop them. "Why are you here?" Samuel asked. Keleth Vorn smiled, or made an expression that humans would learn to recognize as a smile. "We are here to give you a gift." The gift was beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. The Valorians, as they called themselves, offered technology that would take humans thousands of years to develop on their own. Faster than light travel, medical machines that could cure any disease and extend human life by centuries, energy systems that were clean and unlimited, the knowledge to build cities on other worlds and make them comfortable for human life. In exchange, they asked for one thing. "You must stay within the boundaries we set," Keleth Vorn explained. 12 star systems. They are rich with resources, with planets that can support your kind. You may do anything you wish within these systems, build, grow, prosper, but you must not go beyond these borders for 150 of your years. Samuel frowned. "Why? If you trust us enough to give us all of this, why keep us locked in a small part of space?" Keleth Vorn was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle but firm. "Your species is young, Admiral Hayes, very young, and you are violent in ways that concern us. Your history is full of blood. Wars between nations, genocides, cruelty without purpose." He paused. "We do not give you this cage because we hate you. We give it to you because we hope for you. 150 years is nothing to us. It is time for you to mature, to prove that humanity can be trusted among the stars." The debates lasted for months. Some leaders wanted to refuse the offer. They said it was a trap, that the aliens would use the time to study human weaknesses. Others pointed out that humanity had no choice. The Valorians had technology so far beyond human understanding that refusing their offer would not protect Earth from anything in the end. The treaty was signed in Geneva on a cold December morning. Samuel Hayes signed on behalf of United Earth Command. Keleth Vorn signed for the Valorian Dominion. The document was simple, only 3 pages long, but it contained the future of the human race. Diane Murphy watched the signing ceremony from the back of the room. She was 28 years old, full of hope and dreams about what the future might hold. She imagined human cities spreading across the stars, children being born on distant worlds, diseases becoming a memory of the past. "Do you think they really want to help us?" she asked Samuel later that night. As they stood on a balcony watching the Valorian ships prepare to leave, Samuel was quiet for a long time. He had spent his whole life fighting wars, learning to see enemies in every shadow. But something in Keleth Thorne's golden eyes had seemed genuine. Something that looked almost like love. "I think they do," he finally said. "I think they see something in us that we cannot see in ourselves. Something worth saving." He turned to look at Diane. "The question is whether we deserve their faith." The first human faster-than-light ship launched 2 years later. It was called the Horizon 1, and it carried a crew of 200 brave men and women toward the nearest star system granted by the treaty. The whole world watched as the ship activated its Valorian drive and disappeared in a flash of light. 3 days later, it received a message. The crew had arrived safely at Kepler 4-4b. The planet was beautiful. Red skies and vast oceans and land that could grow food. They named their first settlement New Hope. Over the following decades, humanity spread across all 12 systems. They built cities and farms, factories and schools. Children were born who had never seen Earth, who knew only the strange skies of alien worlds. The human population grew from 8 billion to 10 billion, then 20 billion, and more. Samuel Hayes died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 97. His last words, spoken to his daughter who sat beside his bed, were about the Valorians. "They gave us the stars," he whispered. "Do not waste this gift." Diane Murphy lived even longer, thanks to the Valorian medical technology. She became a historian, writing books about the first contact and the treaty that followed. She often thought about that night on the balcony with Samuel, about his hope that humanity might deserve the faith the Valorians had placed in them. For 150 years, humanity kept its promise. They stayed within the 12 systems. They did not test the borders or challenge the Valorians. Some people complained about the limitations, calling the treaty unfair, but most were grateful for what they had been given. The Valorians visited occasionally, always peaceful, always watching with those strange golden eyes. They seemed pleased with human progress. They spoke of a future when the borders might be expanded, when humanity might take its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. No one imagined what would come next. No one imagined that the gift of peace would end in fire by the year 2350. 103 years after the treaty was signed, the 12 human systems had become something wonderful. Cities floated in the clouds of gas giants. Mining stations carved wealth from asteroid belts. Farms covered entire continents of distant worlds, feeding billions of people who had never known hunger. New Chicago was the jewel of human civilization. It spread across the surface of Kepler 4-4 to be like a garden of glass and steel, its towers reaching toward the red sky. 20 billion people called it home. They lived in comfort that their ancestors on Earth could never have imagined. Disease was rare. Poverty was almost unknown. Children grew up believing that the universe was a safe and peaceful place. Governor Patricia Simmons stood at the window of her office, looking out at the city she loved. She was 60 years old, with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped working. Behind her, a dozen advisors waited nervously for her to speak. "The treaty expires in 47 years, Patricia said without turning around. "We need to start planning now for what comes after." Her chief advisor, a man named Gregory Hill, cleared his throat. "Governor, the Valorians have suggested that they may extend the boundaries when the treaty ends. If we are patient, if we continue to show that we can be trusted, they might give us more systems." Patricia turned around, and her eyes were cold. May suggested. She walked to her desk and picked up a tablet. "I have reports here from our intelligence services. The Valorian Dominion is not as stable as it appears. There is a faction called the Purifiers who believe that younger species should be destroyed before they become threats. This faction is growing in power." The room went silent. Everyone knew about the Purifiers, though most people tried not to think about them. They were a nightmare that seemed far away, a problem for the Valorians to deal with. "What are you suggesting?" Gregory asked. Patricia set down the tablet. "I am suggesting that we stop being children waiting for our parents to decide our future. I am suggesting that when the treaty ends, we expand beyond the borders, whether the Valorians approve or not." On the other side of New Chicago, Captain Daniel Ortega was having dinner with his wife Lisa at a small restaurant overlooking the Central Park. They had been married for 3 years, and Lisa was 6 months pregnant with their first child. "The Colonial Assembly is voting tomorrow on increased military spending," Daniel said between bites of food. "Patricia Simmons has been pushing hard for it." Lisa touched her belly, feeling the baby kick. "Do you think there will be trouble? With the Valorians, I mean." Daniel looked out the window at the peaceful city. Children were playing in the park below. Couples walked hand in hand along the paths. It was hard to imagine that anything could threaten this world. "I do not know," he admitted. "The Valorians have been good to us. But some people think we have been too dependent on them, too trusting." Lisa reached across the table and took his hand. "Whatever happens, we will face it together. Our daughter will grow up in a universe where humans are free. That is what matters." Daniel smiled and squeezed her hand. He hoped she was right. The next 5 decades passed quickly. The Colonial Assembly voted to increase military spending. New shipyards were built in secret, hidden in the asteroid belts where Valorian sensors might not find them. The ships they built were not exploration vessels. They were warships, armed with weapons based on Valorian technology, but improved by human engineers. Patricia Simmons, tired from politics, but continued to advise those who came after her. Her vision of human independence had spread through the colonies like a fire. More and more people began to question the treaty, to wonder why humanity should accept boundaries set by aliens. Daniel Ortega rose through the ranks of the Colonial Defense Fleet. He became an admiral, commanding hundreds of ships and thousands of soldiers. His daughter Catherine grew up to be a brilliant engineer. Working on the orbital defense platforms that protected New Chicago from any threat, Lisa grew old beside him, her hair turning gray, her smile never fading. They were happy, even as the political situation grew more tense. They believed that whatever came next, humanity would find a way through. In the year 2397, the treaty expired. Governor Marcus Webb, Patricia Simmons, political successor, stood before the Colonial Assembly and made an announcement that would change everything. For 150 years, "We have honored the agreement our ancestors made with the Valorians," Marcus said. "We have stayed within our borders. We have been peaceful and patient. We have proven that humanity can be trusted." He paused and his voice grew stronger. "But the time for boundaries has ended. Today I am authorizing the first exploration missions beyond the treaty zone. We will seek new worlds, new resources, new opportunities for human civilization." The assembly erupted in cheers. Across the 12 systems, people celebrated. They believed they were witnessing the birth of a new era, a time when humanity would take its rightful place among the stars. The Valorians responded within days. A single ship appeared at the edge of human space, broadcasting a message on all frequencies. "You are in violation of the treaty," the message said. "Turn back your ships. Return to your borders. This is your only warning." Marcus Webb sent his own message in response. "The treaty has expired. We are not your children, and you are not our masters. We will explore the stars as we see fit." The Valorian ship departed without another word. For 6 years, nothing happened. Human ships explored dozens of new systems. They found worlds rich with resources, planets that could support new colonies. Some people thought the Valorians had accepted human expansion. Others warned that the silence was more dangerous than any threat. Daniel Ortega was 73 years old now, retired from active service. He lived quietly with Lisa in a small apartment in New Chicago, spending his days reading and playing with his grandchildren. When Catherine brought them to visit on the night of June 13th, 2403, he stood on his balcony and looked up at the stars. The sky was clear, filled with familiar constellations that humans had given new names. He thought about the Valorians, about the gift they had given, and the warning they had issued. "What are you thinking about?" Lisa asked, coming to stand beside him. Daniel put his arm around her. "Nothing important. Just old memories." Lisa leaned her head against his shoulder. "Come to bed. Catherine is bringing the children tomorrow, and you will need your energy to keep up with them." Daniel smiled and followed his wife inside. He did not know that in a few hours the world he loved would be burning. He did not know that by tomorrow night Lisa would be dead in his arms and Catherine would be ash falling from the sky. He did not know that the Valorians had not forgotten their warning. They had simply been preparing. The alarm started. Screaming at exactly 6 in the morning, Daniel Ortega woke instantly, his old military training taking over before his mind was fully awake. Beside him, Lisa sat up in bed, her face pale with fear. What is happening? She asked. Daniel was already moving to the window. What he saw there froze his blood. The red sky of New Chicago was filled with black shapes, hundreds of them, dropping from the clouds like stones. They were not the silver ships of Valorian diplomats. These were war machines, angular and ugly, covered in weapons that glowed with terrible energy.
Ow.
Daniel whispered, "No, no, no." The first beam of light struck the city center. The explosion was so bright that Daniel had to cover his eyes. When he looked again, a column of fire was rising where the government district had been. Thousands of people, gone in an instant. Lisa grabbed his arm. "Daniel, we need to go. The shelters." Daniel nodded, forcing himself to move. They had drilled for emergencies like this. Every citizen knew where the underground shelters were, but no one had ever really believed they would need them. They ran through the apartment, grabbing nothing but the clothes on their backs. In the hallway, their neighbors were doing the same. Old Mrs. Patterson from next door was crying, clutching a photograph of her grandchildren. Young Tommy Liu from down the hall was carrying his little sister on his back, both of them silent with terror. "This way," Daniel shouted, leading them toward the emergency stairs. "Stay together. Help each other." Outside, the world was ending. Buildings collapsed in clouds of dust and flame. People ran through the streets screaming. The Valorian ships moved methodically across the city, their weapons firing again and again, killing everything below. Daniel heard his communicator beeping. He pulled it from his pocket and saw a message from Catherine. "Dad, I am at the orbital platform. We are under attack. The platforms are falling. I love you. Tell Mom I love her. I am sorry I will not see you again." The message ended. Daniel looked up at the sky and saw the orbital platforms burning, breaking apart. Pieces of them already falling toward the surface like flaming meteors. Catherine Lisa gasped, reading the message over his shoulder. "Daniel, we have to do something. We have to save her." Daniel took her face in his hands. Tears were streaming down his cheeks, but his voice was steady. "She is gone, Lisa. There is nothing we can do. We have to get to the shelter. We have to survive." Lisa collapsed against him, sobbing. He held her for just a moment, then forced them both to keep moving. The shelter entrance was 2 blocks away. It felt like 1,000 miles. Around them, people fell as debris rained from the sky. A woman Daniel did not know was crushed by a falling piece of concrete right in front of him. A man was running past when a beam of light struck him, and he simply vanished, leaving nothing but a shadow burned into the pavement. They were 50 meters from the shelter. The shockwave hit, an explosion somewhere behind them, bigger than any before, sent a wall of force through the streets. Daniel felt himself lifted off his feet, thrown through the air like a leaf in a storm. He hit something hard, and darkness took him. When he awoke, he was lying in rubble. His whole body hurt. Blood covered his face, flowing from a wound on his head. He tried to move and found that he could, barely. "Lisa," he called out, his voice weak. "Lisa, where are you?" He found her 3 meters away, half buried under pieces of a collapsed wall. She was still alive when he reached her. Her eyes were open, looking up at the burning sky.
Ow.
"Daniel," she whispered, "I cannot feel my legs." He pulled the debris off her, working as fast as his broken body would allow. When he saw what remained of her lower body, he knew there was nothing anyone could do. The damage was too great. Even Valorian medical technology could not save her now. "Stay with me," he begged, holding her hand. "Please, Lisa, stay with me." She smiled, that same smile she had given him on their wedding day. The same smile she had given him every morning for 47 years. "I am not afraid," she said. "I will see Catherine soon." "We will wait for you, Lisa, please." Her eyes found his. Live, Daniel. Promise me you will live. Someone has to remember. Someone has to make them pay. Her hand went limp in his. Her eyes stayed open, but they no longer saw anything. Daniel Ortega knelt in the ruins of his world, holding his dead wife, and screamed until his voice broke across all 12 human systems. The same nightmare was unfolding. The Valorians, or rather the Purifiers, who had taken control of the Valorian Dominion, attacked with perfect coordination. Every world, every station, every ship was hit at the same moment. There was no time to organize a defense. There was no time to call for help. There was only death. New Manila burned. New Lagos was bombed until nothing remained but craters. Earth itself, the birthplace of humanity, was seeded with biological weapons that killed everything they touched. Old cities that had stood for thousands of years became tombs in hours. The attack lasted 72 hours. When it finally ended, 8 billion humans were dead. The survivors, barely 2 million scattered across hidden bunkers and secret bases, could only watch in horror as the Purifiers celebrated their victory. Daniel Ortega survived because fate is cruel. He dragged himself through the ruins of New Chicago for 3 days, eating whatever he could find, drinking water from broken pipes. On the 4th day, he found a resistance cell hidden in the basement of a collapsed hospital. They took him in. They treated his wounds. They told him what had happened to the other worlds, and he wept until he had no tears left. A young woman named Maria Vance was the leader of the cell. She was 30 years old, a xenobiologist who had spent her career studying Valorian technology. Now she studied it for a different purpose. They made a mistake, Maria told Daniel one night as they sat in the darkness of their underground refuge. They think they killed us all. They are already moving on, already looking for other species to destroy. They left their dead behind. They left their crashed ships. Daniel looked at her with empty eyes. What does it matter? We are finished. There is nothing left. Maria leaned forward, and in her eyes Daniel saw something that surprised him. Not grief. Not despair, rage. We are not finished, she said. We are just beginning. The Valorians gave us 150 years of peace. They taught us their technology. They showed us how powerful they are. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And now we are going to use everything they taught us to destroy them. Daniel thought about Lisa. He thought about Catherine. He thought about 8 billion human beings who had trusted the Valorians and died for that trust. Tell me what you need, he said. Maria smiled, and it was not a nice smile. I need you to help me build an army. The survivors gathered in the deep places of the universe. They came from hidden bunkers beneath ruined cities, from mining stations in asteroid belts, from ships that had been far enough from the attacks to escape. 2 million humans, scattered across the darkness like seeds waiting to grow. Admiral Christopher Santos called the First Council. Meeting in a cavern buried 3 kilometers beneath an unnamed moon in the Tau Ceti system. He was 68 years old, a man who had commanded fleets and fought pirates and negotiated treaties. Now he commanded the remnants of a murdered civilization. We need to count our resources, Christopher said, looking around at the faces lit by emergency lights. Ships, weapons, food, medicine, people with skills we need. Everything must be documented and shared. The reports came in slowly over the following weeks. The news was both terrible and hopeful. Terrible because they had almost nothing. Hopeful because almost nothing was more than nothing at all. They had 47 ships that could still fly. Most were small vessels, meant for transport or mining. Only 6 were warships, and all of them were damaged. They had food stores that would last 3 years if they were careful. They had medical supplies for perhaps 2 years. They had weapons enough to arm maybe 10,000 soldiers. And they had 2 million people who wanted revenge. Daniel Ortega became one of the council's military advisors. He was over 70 years old now, but his mind was sharp and his hatred kept him strong. Every night, he dreamed of Lisa dying in his arms. Every morning he woke with the same thought. Make them pay. Maria Vance led the science division. She had gathered every scientist, engineer, and technician who survived, putting them to work studying the Valorian technology they had captured. Dead Valorian soldiers were examined, their biology mapped down to the cellular level. Crashed Valorian ships were taken apart piece by piece, their secrets recorded and understood. "They are not gods," Maria reported to the council after 6 months of work. "They are strong, yes. Their technology is advanced, yes. But they have weaknesses." She pulled up images on a makeshift display screen. "Their biology is specialized. Their immune systems are designed for their home world and have not changed in thousands of years. They stopped evolving long ago because they became too comfortable." She smiled grimly. "A disease tailored to their specific biology could spread through their population like fire through dry grass." Christopher Santos frowned. "You are talking about biological warfare, creating a plague to kill them." "I am talking about survival," Maria replied. "They murdered 8 billion of us. Men, women, children. They did not hesitate. They did not show mercy. Why should we?" The debate lasted for weeks. Some argued that using biological weapons would make humanity no better than the purifiers. Others pointed out that humanity had no chance of winning a conventional war against a civilization that controlled 1,000 star systems. Daniel Ortega spoke rarely during these debates. He sat in the back of the council chamber, listening to arguments that seemed meaningless to him. When Christopher Santos finally asked for his opinion, Daniel stood slowly and faced the assembly. "My wife died in my arms," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "My daughter was burned to ash in the sky. My grandchildren were killed in their beds. I do not care about honor. I do not care about being better than our enemies." He looked around the room at faces marked by the same grief he carried. "I care about making them feel what we felt. I care about making sure that no Valorian ever sleeps peacefully again." He sat down. The room was silent. The vote passed overwhelmingly. Maria Vance and her team began work on what they called Project Reckoning, while the scientists worked on the biological weapon. The military prepared for a different kind of war. They could not fight the Valorians in open battle, not yet, but they could hurt them in smaller ways. The raids began in the second year after the Genocide. Small groups of human ships would jump into Valorian space, attack a supply convoy or an isolated outpost, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. Each raid killed Valorians. Each raid captured weapons and technology. Each raid proved that humanity was not extinct. Daniel commanded many of these raids himself, despite his age. He flew in cramped cockpits, led boarding parties onto Valorian ships, and killed more enemies than he could count. The other soldiers started calling him the Ghost, because he seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish without a trace. The Valorians were confused at first, then angry. They sent hunting fleets to find the human survivors, but they were looking in the wrong places. The humans had learned to hide in the shadows between stars, in the vast empty spaces where no one thought to look. 5 years after the Genocide, Maria Vance announced that Project Reckoning was ready. The weapon was not a bomb or a missile. It was a virus, invisible and patient. It would spread through water and air, through food and physical contact. It would hide in Valorian bodies for months, doing nothing, giving no warning. Then, when it had spread far enough, it would activate. "The symptoms will begin slowly," Maria explained to the council. "Fatigue, weakness, difficulty breathing. Then the organs begin to fail, one by one. Death comes within 2 weeks of the first symptoms. There is no cure. Our scientists designed it to be resistant to any treatment Valorian medicine can offer." Christopher Santos looked at the holographic image of the virus rotating above the table. It looked so small, so simple. It was hard to believe it could kill a civilization. "How do we deliver it?" he asked. Maria smiled. "We already have. For the past 2 years, our raiding parties have been leaving small containers behind on every ship we attack, every station we visit. The containers are designed to release the virus slowly, over months. By now, it has spread to hundreds of Valorian worlds." The council members stared at her in shock. "You did this without our approval?" Christopher demanded. "You approved the project," Maria replied calmly. You knew what we were building. I simply chose not to wait for more debates while our people died in hiding. She looked around the room. The virus is already spreading. In perhaps 5 years, it will reach critical mass. Then the Valorians will begin to die. Daniel Ortega felt something stir in his chest. Not happiness? Exactly. He was not sure he would ever feel happiness again, but something like satisfaction. Something like justice. What do we do now? He asked. Maria turned to face him. Now we wait. We continue our raids. We grow stronger while they grow weaker. And when they are dying, when their worlds are falling apart, we attack with everything we have. She walked to the window of the underground chamber, looking out at the rocky surface of the moon above them. They gave us 150 years to prove ourselves. They decided we were too dangerous to live. Now, we are going to show them just how right they were. The plague began to show its teeth in the year 2418, 15 years after the genocide. Reports started coming from Valorian outer colonies. Mysterious illness. Hospitals overwhelmed. People dying by the thousands with no explanation. The purifiers, who had led the extermination of humanity, tried to contain the disease. They quarantined worlds, burned cities, executed the sick in hopes of stopping the spread. Nothing worked. The virus had been designed by Maria Vance and her team with terrible precision. It could not be stopped. By 2423, the plague had reached the core worlds of the Valorian Dominion. Billions were infected. Millions were dying every day. The great civilization that had ruled 1,000 star systems for 300,000 years was crumbling from within, and then the human fleet emerged from the shadows. They had spent 20 years building, 20 years capturing ships and weapons, 20 years training soldiers born in hiding, children who had grown up knowing nothing but war. What had once been 47 damaged vessels was now a fleet of over 300 ships. Armed with weapons that combined human creativity with Valorian technology, Admiral Christopher Santos was 90 years old now, kept alive by Valorian medical technology that the humans had stolen and improved. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive warship built in secret in the asteroid belts, and gave the order that would begin the final war. All ships advance. No mercy, no prisoners. Remember what they did to us? Daniel Ortega was 103 years old. His body was failing despite the medical treatments, but he had refused to stay behind. He flew in the secondary fleet, commanding a squadron of fast attack ships crewed by young soldiers who called him grandfather. Sir, we are approaching the first target, his aide reported. The Valorian colony on Telemar 3. Population estimated at 200 million. Daniel looked at the planet growing larger on his screen. It was a beautiful world, covered in forests and rivers, with cities that sparkled like jewels. Once, he might have felt pity for the people living there. Once he might have hesitated. Not anymore. Begin bombardment, he ordered. Destroy everything. The war lasted 40 years. It was not really a war. It was an extermination, a genocide in reverse. The humans attacked world after world, killing Valorians wherever they found them. The plague did most of the work, but human weapons finished what the disease started. The Valorians tried to fight back, but their civilization was dying. Their ships went unrepaired because the engineers were sick. Their soldiers went unfed because the farmers were dead. Their leaders gave orders that no one followed because there was no one left to follow them. Some Valorians tried to surrender. They begged for mercy, promised to leave human space forever, offered anything if only the killing would stop. The humans listened to their pleas and killed them anyway. Others tried to flee, racing toward the edges of the galaxy in desperate hope of escape. Some succeeded, vanishing into the darkness between galaxies. Most were hunted down and destroyed. Maria Vance became the leader of the Human Confederation after Christopher. Santos died in the 30th year of the war. She was 70 years old now, a woman made of iron and hatred. Under her command, the human fleet pushed deeper into Valorian space, taking system after system, leaving only ash behind. Daniel Ortega died in the 35th year of the war. Peacefully, in his bed on a ship orbiting a world that had once been a Valorian paradise. He was 138 years old. His last words were a whisper meant for ears that could no longer hear him. "I am coming, Lisa. I am coming, Catherine. Wait for me." The final battle took place above Valoria Prime, the ancient homeworld of the Valorian people. It had once been the jewel of a galactic empire, a planet of silver cities and golden spires where the greatest minds had gathered for 300,000 years. Now it was a graveyard. The plague had killed 90% of the population. The cities were silent. The spires were empty. The human fleet descended like angels of death. They did not need to fight. There was almost no one left to resist. They simply landed and began the final cleansing. Maria Vance walked through the streets of the capital city herself, surrounded by soldiers carrying weapons they did not need. The bodies of Valorians lay everywhere, killed by disease or by their own hands as hope abandoned them. She found the Grand Archive, the repository of all Valorian knowledge, and stood before the inscription carved above its entrance. "Wisdom is the light that guides all beings." The words read in the Valorian language. Maria ordered the archive burned. She watched as 300,000 years of history turned to smoke and ash. "Let their wisdom die with them," she said. The war ended in the year 2463, 60 years after the genocide. The Valorian dominion was gone. Their 1,000 systems were empty. Their people were extinct, except for a handful of refugees who had fled to the farthest reaches of the universe. Humanity had won. They had survived extinction and destroyed the civilization that tried to kill them. They inherited an empty galaxy, a graveyard of worlds waiting to be reborn. The cost was terrible. Of the 2 million survivors of the genocide, only 8 million remained by the end of the war. But that 8 million had conquered the stars. On the 60th anniversary of the genocide, now called Remembrance Day, Maria Vance gave a speech from the steps of the new Colonial Assembly on rebuilt New Chicago. "We were given a gift once," she said to the assembled millions, "a gift of peace and technology and hope. We trusted those who gave it to us. We believed they wanted us to succeed." Our voice hardened. "They betrayed that trust. They murdered our families, our children, our future. They tried to erase humanity from existence." She looked up at the sky, at stars that now belonged entirely to humanity. "We taught them what happens when you push humans too far. We taught them that we are not children to be guided or sheep to be slaughtered. We are predators, born from a world of blood and fire, and when we are threatened, we do not hide. We fight, we survive, we win." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Let the galaxy remember what we did here. Let every species who watches the stars know the price of threatening humanity. We will live in peace with those who offer peace. We will trade with those who offer trade. But if anyone tries to do to us what the Valorians did, we will destroy them utterly, down to the last child, down to the last memory." She raised her hand to the sky. "We gave them 150 years of peace. They gave us genocide. We gave them extinction. Let that be our legacy. Let that be our warning." In a small park in the center of New Chicago, a memorial stood. It was a simple stone wall, carved with 8 billion names, all the humans who had died in the genocide. At the bottom of the wall, someone had carved words that had no author and needed none. You remember? "We survived. We are still here." The stars burned above, cold and eternal, belonging now to humanity alone. The gift had been repaid.